everyone. Welcome back for another story. I'm glad you could join me. Today's story is called Shoemaker Martin, and I'll just put out there that it's based on a fairy tale by Leo Tolstoy. But the lesson is amazing, and every Christian should remember this lesson. So I think it's important, and I like the story, and so we are going to read that. In a small town in Russia, there once lived a man called Martin who earned his living mending shoes. He lived and worked in a basement room. Through the windows, all he could see of people passing by were their legs. But he still recognized most of them, as there was scarcely a pair of boots or shoes in town that he had not mended at one time or another. Martin worked all day until it became too dark for him to see his work. Then he would make a pot of tea, light the lamp, and take down his big Bible from the shelf. He read many pages, and the more he read, the happier he felt. One winter evening, he went on reading till it was very late, and he reached the story of the rich man who invited Jesus into his home. Martin thought hard. If Jesus comes to visit me, what would I say? What would I do? How would I welcome him? Still thinking about this, Martin fell asleep. "Martin!" called a voice suddenly. Martin woke up, but no one was there. Then he heard the voice again. It said, "Make sure you watch the street tomorrow, because I shall be coming." Martin sat up and rubbed his eyes. Had he really heard those words, or was it just a dream? He looked carefully around the room, but he saw nobody. He turned out the lamp and soon went back to sleep. The next morning, Martin got up very early, before dawn. He lit the stove and put the kettle of water on it. As he ate his breakfast, he looked out of the window, wondering whether it had been a dream last night, or whether he really would see some unfamiliar shoes belonging to a very special stranger. Still pondering, he set to work. Just as he was cutting a piece on leather, Martin heard footsteps outside. He looked up, but only saw poor old Stephen, the street sweeper. Stephen was stamping his feet and blowing into his freezing hands in an effort to get warm. Quickly, Martin opened the window and called, "Come on in, Stephen, and warm up a bit. The kettle's just boiling." Stephen staggered in. "Don't bother to wipe your feet. Sit down here by the stove." Stephen sipped the hot tea that Martin gave him, and when he felt warm again, he thanked Martin gratefully before leaving. "Don't mention it. Come any time," replied Martin. Martin drank a cup of tea himself, then made some cabbage soup for later. When next he looked out of the window, he saw a young woman standing huddled out in the bad weather with a baby in her arms. She was trying to wrap up that baby to shelter it from the cold wind, but she scarcely had anything to wrap it in except her thin, shabby dress. Martin went up to the door and called her in. He gave her some of his hot soup and brought his old coat to put around her shoulders. It was big enough to protect her and the baby. Afterward, he played with the baby and made it laugh. Finally, Martin fetched some money from an old trunk and gave it to the mother to buy some milk. The poor woman bowed and thanked Martin most gratefully before she left, feeling much, much better. Martin finished off the soup and cleared away the dishes. Later, as he sat at work again, a shadow fell upon the window, and Martin looked up eagerly. But it was just townsfolk passing by. Some of them he knew, and some he didn't, but nobody in particular caught his attention or seemed like a special visitor. All at once he heard shouting outside the street. A market woman was dragging along a poorly dressed boy who had stolen one of her apples. She tugged at him by the hair, and the boy protested and struggled to get away. Martin hurried out and separated them. "Let him go, grandmother," he begged. "He won't do it again. If we punish someone so harshly for taking an apple, what punishments would we expect for our sins that are far, far worse?" The boy and the woman looked at Martin, and then looked at each other. Quietly, The boy asked the old woman to forgive him and offered to carry her basket along the road. Martin wanted to finish stitching one of the boots that had to be delivered tomorrow. Soon it was dark. The lighter passed by, lighting the street lamps. Martin finished the boot. Then he put his tools away and swept the scraps of leather from the floor. He took down his lamp from the nail on the wall and placed it on the table so that he could read once again the passage from the Bible that had been so much on his mind since last night. Suddenly he had the feeling that somebody was moving behind him. He looked around, and this time it really seemed there were people in the room, but Martin could not make out who they were. Then the voice whispered in his ear, "Martin, didn't you recognize me?" "Who?" "Me." And out of the shadows stepped Stephen, smiling. "This was me too," the voice said again, and the woman with the baby came forward. She smiled, and the baby laughed. "And this was me as well," the voice said, and the old woman appeared together with the boy who had taken the apple. Both of them were smiling. Martin looked at them all in amazement, and then each one vanished. Then the shoemaker realized that his dream had come true after all. Jesus really visited him that day, and he, Martin, had taken him in. Martin was overcome with joy. He began reading from the Bible where it had fallen open. It was a different page from the one that he had read last night. At the top of the page he read, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." I love that. When we serve others, we are serving Jesus. No matter what we do, it's like we're doing it for Jesus. And so we want to make sure that we serve and that we love and that we help. Because when we take care of the least of these or any of these, we're doing that for Jesus. I hope you find someone to reach out to today. Have a Merry Christmas.